around the world. And I know that there are some people in other countries who are tuning into this as well. So hello to you as well. And so the first story, I thought we'd take a global theme and go right back to the beginning. In the beginning, before there were people, before there was a world, there was only Raven and her friend, Coyote. And together, Raven and Coyote decided that they would make the world. The Raven, because she could fly, she made the sky and everything you find in the sky. She made the clouds, the rain, the snow, the thunder. She made the lightning, the rainbows, the stars, and the moon. Coyote, because he could run so fast, he made the dirt. He made the dirt, the rocks. He made the mountains, the valleys, the forests, the meadows. He made the rivers, the oceans, everything that you find on the earth. I'm making Tony work really hard here. Catching up. After they had made all of that, they realized that the world seemed very empty. And so they made the animal people. They made the buffalo, the horses, the badgers, the hedgehogs. They made the butterflies, the fish, the ants, everything that you find in the world. And when they had finished all of that, they had one very important decision left to make about life and about death. Raven felt that all of the animals they had created should be allowed to live forever, to be immortal, like herself and Coyote. But Coyote did not like that idea. He wanted it that all of the animals lived for a time, but then died. Because that way he thought it was safer. He was afraid the animals would eventually know as much as he did if they were allowed to live forever. They argued. Raven and Coyote, they argued over which one of them was right. Coyote put forward a lot of really good arguments. And so eventually Raven agreed. She said, fine, we'll have it your way. We will make everything to live for a time, but then it will die. Time passed. Coyote had a family. And then one of his sons died. Filled with grief, he came to Raven, begged her to change her mind. He said, I want it that everything lives forever. Please, Raven, we need to change our minds. We need to make it that everything lives forever. Raven said, it's too late. It was your idea. We cannot change our minds now. But Coyote would not accept this, would not believe this. Anger bubbled away deep inside him, and he ran away determined to take revenge on Raven. He ran to a part in the world where there was a clay pit, and with his paws he pulled out lumps of clay, began to mold and shape monsters. Coyote brought monsters to life, sent them out into the world to go and find Raven and kill her. But the thing is, Raven, she wasn't stupid, and besides, she had wings. And she could easily see those monsters coming from far away. So Coyote had to think again. What he needed to make was a monster that didn't look like a monster. He took more clay, shaped it, molded it, brought it to life. And in this way, Coyote created man. But man was a very different kind of monster. Man could think. Man questioned everything. And Coyote had to use all of his cunning to convince man to go and find Raven and kill her. But eventually, man agreed. Coyote snapped off one of his claws, gave it to man to use as a dagger, and man went in hunt of Raven. When he found Raven, she was in a cave by a small burning fire, and she had a silver ball that she was cleaning with the feathers of her wings. And when man saw the ball, he was curious. "What's that?" he said. "Don't know," said Raven. "Found it yesterday." And then Raven saw the dagger in man's hand, and she knew why he was there. So she said, "Fine, if you are here to kill me, you can kill me, but I warn you, if you kill me, you will forever remain a monster. But if you decide not to kill me, I will give you a gift. I will make you guardian, caretaker over all the animals in the world." And man thought, and then he dropped the dagger, deciding it would be much nicer to look after all these wonderful animals. But as he dropped the dagger, Coyote leapt from the shadows. His teeth bared, he was snarling, he was furious, and he leapt upon Raven, and the two rolled about on the floor in a full-on scrap. Raven scooped up the ball in her wing, threw it at man and said, "Run!" And man caught the ball and he ran out into the world. And for day after day, he carried the ball, wondering what he was supposed to do with it. He began to ask some of the animals if they knew. He asked the buffalo, he asked the salmon, he asked the horses, he even asked the ants. None of them knew. And so eventually he threw it away. But as he threw it, the silver ball changed into a ball of burning fire and flame. It grew bigger and bigger, rose higher and higher into the sky, until it became the sun. And now for the first time, the world was filled with sunlight, bathing the world in its warm rays. And, well, the animals, they felt good. They had never experienced sunlight before, and I'm sure all of you, if you've been lucky enough to see the sun as we have here in Swansea, you've felt a lot better today because of it. And all of the animals did as well. They loved this new thing in the sky. And so they decided to make man a present to thank him for creating the sun. All of the animals gathered together and they took some clay of their own and they molded it and they shaped it and they created a present for man, which they took. And when they found man, they said, "Oh, man, we've made you a present. We'd like you to meet woman. Woman meet man, man meet woman. Together, if you choose, you can build an incredible world together." And that is apparently more or less what they did. However, those monsters that Coyote first made, well, those monsters can still be found in the world today. Except today we know them as war, famine, and disease. But they also say that as long as man and woman continue to work together to help each other, they will always beat those monsters. And that is the story of Raven and Coyote. So, in an ordinary storytelling, we'd have a bit of a chit chat right now. I'm going to quickly change the view because I want to see. There we go. I've decided to change the view a bit, see a few new faces because we've got so many people. I'm having to scroll through the pages. Brilliant. So yes, the story of Raven and Coyote, obviously a story with roots very deep in the Native American tradition. But the story I've decided that we'll finish on comes from much closer to home. And there were many stories I could have shared with you in this session, but I decided I'd go for an old favorite. And this story was shared with me by Stephen Badman from Tall Tales in Newport. But it's not from Newport, it's not from Wales, it's actually a Danish story. And for this story, I need to introduce you to two widows. So the first widow I need to introduce you to is Mette. Mette Tight Fist, everyone called her. And they called her Tight Fist because, well, that's kind of what she was. She was a tight fist. She was miserly. She never liked to do anything for anyone. It was all about her. And I dare say there's probably a few people you've met in your time who you might say were tight fists. Well, that was Mette. But the other widow, her name was Hanne. Hanne Open Palm, everybody called her. Because as stingy and as miserly as Mette Tight Fist was, Hanne was the complete opposite. She would give her last penny to anybody who needed it. If she could do anything for anyone, she would. And that was why they called her Hanne Open Palm. So our story begins on a very cold and stormy night. A beggar man with his tattered coat pulled up tight around his neck, but the rain was hammering down so hard he was soaked to the skin. He was cold and he was desperately in need of shelter. And in the dark, he could see a light. And he made his way towards that light, and when he got there, he found a great mansion house. And beside that great mansion house, there were stables, there were barns, and he dreamt of spending a night in one of those barns, in the dry, snuggle down into some nice warm straw. That was his idea of heaven. But he wasn't just going to go into that barn. No, no, he might have been a beggar man, but he had manners. And he went straight up to that mansion house and he knocked on the door. And when the door opened, it opened just a tiny bit. And peering through the gap in the door was the face of Mette Tightfist. "What do you want?" she said. "I'm so sorry to trouble you," said the beggar, "but it is a dreadful night. I am cold. I am wet through. I was just wondering if I could spend the night in one of your barns." "No," she said, "go away. If you want help, go over there." And she pointed to another faint light in the distance across some open fields, and then she slammed the door in the beggar man's face. And so the beggar man made his way again out into the rain, through the cold and dark, across the fields to the other light. And when he got there, he found a tiny little candle burning in a little window of a ramshackled cottage. He went to the door and he knocked. And this time the door didn't open a little bit, it opened a lot. It opened all the way. And there stood in front of the beggar man was Hanne Open Palm. And before the beggar man could even say his first word, Hanne's response was, "Oh my goodness me! Look at you," she said. "Come in, come in." And the beggar man was ushered into her home. She shut the door. She said, "Oh my goodness me, look at you. You are soaked through. Get those wet clothes off," she said. "Here, take this blanket, wrap it around yourself. Go and sit by the fire." And so the beggar man wrapped the warm, cozy blanket around him, took off his soaking wet clothes. Hanne bundled up his clothes and put them straight in for the wash. He sat down by the warm, toasty fire, and she gave him a drink, she gave him food. And the beggar man could not believe such generosity. And whilst Hanne worked on washing his clothes, she was talking to him, asking all about him. And she said, "Well, I tell you one thing for certain, there's no way you're going out tonight in that." "No," she said, "you can sleep in our bed. My daughter and I, we will sleep by the fire. You can sleep in our bed." "No," said the beggar man, "I will not hear of it. Not at all," he said. "I will sleep by the fire. That will be more comfort than I have had in months." "Not another word," said Hanne Open Palm. And that was how it happened. The beggar man slept in a bed for the first time in months. And when he awoke, oh, he could smell breakfast being cooked. He came down, he was fed, and he stood in his nice, clean, dry clothes and said, "Thank you for your generosity. I only wish I could pay you, but I have nothing left to give. But what I will give you is this." And then he said something very strange. He said, "May the first thing you do today be the most successful thing you have ever done, and may it continue to be so for the entire day." And with that, he went on his way. Hanne Open Palm was confused. May the first thing I do today be the most successful thing I've ever done, and may it be so for the entire... It just seemed like a riddle, and she didn't have time for riddles. No, the first thing she had to do that day was to make her daughter a new dress. But she wasn't sure she had enough material, so she went to her material box and she took a piece of linen and her measuring stick, and she pulled out 1 yard, 2 yard, 3 yards, measuring the linen. And more of the linen began to come out of the box, and she thought, "Well, there's plenty here." More and more and more. And she thought, "Yes, I've definitely got enough." And then she tried to stop, but she couldn't stop. No matter how hard she tried, she just kept measuring. But what was stranger was that there was still linen coming from the box. It was piling up beside her, and still there was more and more material coming from the box. The pile of material began to fill up the room, began to pile up the stairs and into the bedroom. It began to pile out of the windows, and still more and more linen came from the box, yard after yard, meter after meter, and it was not until the sun finally set behind the mountains that she finally managed to stop. She was exhausted. She didn't understand what was happening. She just knew her house was filled with linen. And there was no way she was going to be able to sleep. So she got her scissors and she spent the night cutting it and folding it. The next morning she took it to market, and it was top quality linen, A grade. She made a fortune. And with the money she made, she began to make improvements to her ramshackle cottage. It didn't take long for Mette Tightfist to see what was going on, and, well, as you will know if you live in a small place, people talk. And Mette began to hear about this beggar, and she put two and two together, and she realised how she had missed out. So she plotted and schemed as to how she might benefit from this. Right. She summoned her servants, sent them out to go and find that beggar man, and to not come back until they found him, and to bring him with them. And that was what they did. They searched, they eventually found him, and they brought the beggar man back to her home. And as he was brought in that great mansion house door, Mette Tightfist tried her best at smiling. But you see, she was never one for smiling. But she realised she had to try. "Hello," she said. "I feel I owe you an apology. You see, when you came to see me all those weeks before, well, I was having a dreadful day," she said. "My servants, they were giving me so much trouble, and I took it out on you, and that was not fair. So to make up for it, I want you to come and stay here. Not just for a night, no, you can stay for a week," she said. And the beggar man said, "Oh, that is very kind of you, thank you." And Mette Tightfist called for her chef to make him food. And that night he slept in one of the guest beds. And Mette Tightfist that night, well, she didn't sleep. She didn't sleep a wink, because she realised she would have to burn those very expensive Egyptian cotton sheets. There's no way she was going to actually use those sheets again after that man had slept in them. But still, it would be worth it. Yes, it would be worth it. By the morning, the chef was once again cooking breakfast for the beggar man. And when the beggar man had finished eating, he stood up and he said, "Thank you for your generosity. I know you offered me a week, but really, one day is more than enough. I am not used to this kind of luxury. And I wish I could pay you for your generosity, but I cannot. But what I will give you is this. May the first thing you do today be the most successful thing you have ever done, and may it continue to be so for the entire day." And with that, he left, leaving Mette Tightfist excited beyond her wildest dreams. That was what she had been waiting for. May the first thing I do today be the most successful thing. Well, she thought, do I count my gold or do I count my money? Can I count them both at the same time? I am going to be richer than Midas, she thought. But you see, Mette Tightfist, she used to think a lot, maybe too much. All her plotting and her scheming up until now had brought her a great richness, wealth, money, gold. But as she thought and thought about what she would do as the first thing, she thought, no, if I'm going to be spending the entire day counting my gold, well, I don't want to be caught short. I better go to the toilet first. And so that proved to be the most successful thing she had ever done for the entire day. And I like to think it's the reason why toilet paper these days has become so hard to come by. And that, my friends, brings us to the end. David, could I ask you to unmute if you can?